At 43 years old, I finally realised that the secret to being happy as an adult is to just do the stuff you loved when you were 9. Which might sound ridiculous, but honestly, that's pretty much my life now. Video games, Lego, wrestling, football, Disneyland. I've basically turned my entire childhood into a career, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Today, I want to tell you why this is the best advice you'll ever hear and why the increasing trend of edgy kids posting things like "grown man, by the way" in the comments all over social media are just miserable and making themselves even more miserable with their fake macho outlook on life. And this all stems from a TikTok that I saw recently, which typically I now can't find, so can't show you it or quote it directly, but it was basically something along the lines of voiceover saying the key to happiness as an adult is just picking up the hobbies you loved at age 9. And it really hit me because that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 20 years or so without even consciously realizing that was the plan. It started in my mid-20s, and now as I race towards my mid-40s, it's literally become my job. But let's rewind a bit and talk about how I got here. And while I'm rewinding, if you enjoy these more casual, conversational, chatty storytime videos that I'm posting on the channel these days, make sure you leave a like to show me you want to see more stuff like this. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next one. Because with the content still a little bit scattered, shall we say, on here, YouTube sometimes doesn't know which videos of mine to actually push out to which viewers. So showing them you like what I'm doing helps them work out what to show you. It's a beautiful circle of content. But back to story time with your old pal Kev. And we're going all the way back to my late teens. As long-time viewers will know, I was married with a kid by the time I was 19, and the next kid came along when I was in my early 20s. And when my kids were little, my hobbies pretty much stopped. Partly because I didn't have time for them anymore, or space in my house for them anymore, and partly because I needed money fast, and a quick way to get some was to sell everything that wasn't tied down, which included all my childhood toys and collections, my games consoles, pretty much everything. For years when they were small, the only thing I did for fun was play Football Manager, or Championship Manager, as it was at the time, on various £250 disposable laptops from Tesco that would last a year or two before they melted and had to be replaced. Then the Xbox 360 came out, and I thought, you know what? Go on then, I'll treat myself. My kids were a little bit older by this point, and I was starting to get some free time in the evenings again. I was earning decent money. We'd just moved into a nice 3-bedroom house with some room to actually put some stuff in again. So I took the plunge, and that was it. Gears of War, Halo, FIFA, Mario, Pokemon. I was hooked again, and obviously from some of the games I've listed there, you realise I didn't just stick to the Xbox 360. I quickly got myself a PS3, a PSP, a 3DS, a Wii. Suddenly, I was surrounded by consoles. And those games weren't just a bit of fun. And this sounds cheesy, they gave me something for me again. But, you know, they reminded me why I loved gaming as a kid. And I even started to show a few glimpses of where I'd end up years later with a couple of cheeky little action figures. I had Master Chief from Halo and Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War. And every now and again, they'd sneak onto the TV cabinet near my consoles before they got moved out of the room again on a regular basis by my ex-wife. But fast forward a few years from there, and that love of gaming turned into the Mature Gamer podcast, which is still going strong 15 years later, releases every Saturday morning on all good podcast platforms and some rubbish ones too. And that kind of indirectly led to my first YouTube channel, and that's a whole story for another video. But ultimately, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you about this now without that moment of picking up a controller again in my mid-20s. And it did just kind of snowball massively from there. One hobby sparked another, and I realised that maybe growing up doesn't have to mean letting go of the things that make you happy. And once that door was open, all bets were off. Wrestling figures? I've now got more of those than I had as a kid, including most of the ones I owned as a kid, and several rings. I've got a storage unit full of board games, hundreds of Funko Pops, Bugglers, thousands of comics and graphic novels, Pokemon cards, football stickers, football shirts, Basically, if 9-year-old Kev liked it, 40-something Kev probably bought it and then used it to fill his office, the spare room next to the office, the living room, and a storage unit. And then, of course, a couple of years ago, Lego happened. I went from barely touching a brick for 20 years to now having a collection that, I mean, it's insured for 20 grand, and I don't think we're far off with that as its value. 3 rooms of our house are just full of Lego, and we have an entire studio space off-site just to put the Lego city in. Our holidays this year, I've been to the Lego house in Denmark, Amsterdam for a Lego store visit, and Disneyland Paris. And we're even now looking at buying annual passes for Disneyland when we're there next week. Basically, my life is one big toy box. And contrary to what the toxic masculinity teenage boy brigade would have you think down in the comments, I'm not even a little bit embarrassed by any of it. There's been a definite rise in the last few months of people in my comment section, both here and over on TikTok, on all of the channels, posting things like grown man, by the way, like it's an insult. I think it's their new buzz phrase that they've picked up from somewhere. But those comments always come from people who just look and sound miserable. The happiest I've ever been is right now. I wake up every day and do the things I love as a kid. That's the dream, isn't it? Work and play are basically the same thing for me now. If you told 9-year-old me this would be his job, this would be his life, he'd think he'd won the lottery. And in fact, that's probably the true test of happiness. If I did win the lottery, I don't see that my day-to-day life would actually change very much. I might be doing all of this in a bigger house with more stuff and maybe a few more holidays, but the actual day-to-day activities wouldn't really change. And I'm not sure many of the living for the weekend, hate their job, hate their spouse, hate their kids, hate their life rascals who have a problem with what I do with my life could say the same thing. Have that. So here's my challenge to you. What did you love when you were 9? Drawing, playing football, collecting stamps, whatever it was, bring it back. Don't worry if it feels silly. The things that made you happy back then will probably make you happy now. And honestly, who doesn't need a little bit more happy in their life? Forget what people think. Forget what's age appropriate. Being a grown-up is hard enough as it is. Is there any harm in making it fun? Do the things you loved as a kid. Trust me, your life will be better for it. And if you like this kind of chat, gaming, Lego, travel, all the nerdy stuff that I get up to, make sure you hit subscribe. This channel is basically a channel for people who refuse to grow up properly, because honestly, I think that's the best way to live. Toodle pip.